Momentum SMME and Side Hustle report provides insights into the state of small, medium and micro enterprises and side hustles in South Africa, while the research dives deep into the lives of SMME owners and side hustlers, classifying them into 4 distinct groups based on their cash flow quadrants. Well, the big questions are: what drives their success? How do they define the achievement? And what's the secret to their business and personal growth? Well, to unpack more on these insights is Itumeleng, Olien, Strategy and Insights Manager for Group Marketing at Momentum. Well, let's dive into this conversations. What are the primary income categories in South Africa, and rather, how do SMMEs and side hustles fit into these categories?
Yeah, so good afternoon, and thank you for having me, Prudence. So we did the research on side hustles and SMMEs, right? And we adopted the quadrant model from Robert Kiyosaki, where we then classified 4 quadrants, predominantly starting as an employee. And then from an employee perspective, we move on to self-employed. From self-employed, it would be a business owner and then an investor. And then we then said that it is then a possibility that all of these quadrants would then have what we classified side hustles. So for example, taking into account the need to make extra income, and then also then maybe sometimes also following your passion. There are some of the drivers that sort of can drive the need for side hustles that is coming through. So the main source of income, obviously from an employment perspective, would be salaries. Business owners would be making money from the business as well, so profits from the revenues they make. And then self-employed is obviously making then income from also then selling their time. So for example, these are things like doctors, lawyers, those are then what we call self-employed, where the business is also quite dependent on their availability. And then you've got the last quadrant, which is your investors. The investors are then typically then people that then make money from investing, so the money sort of works for them. So those are the 4 quadrants that we then had in the research.
So what are the most common types of side hustles in South Africa, and rather, how do you vary by demographic?
So how we vary by demographic is that you find that side hustles were typically seen as more your lower income people coming in, so less than 10,000 Rand coming in with side hustles. One of the things we're also seeing outside of the report as well is that when you look at global trends that are coming across, is that side hustles, especially in Africa, have started to come through in more your middle to higher income earners as well. And those are some of the drivers that are driven by the economic factors to sort of supplement income and trying to sort of meet the living income standards that we sort of have, and obviously high inflation and so forth. So those are some of the sources of from a demographic perspective when you look at the income. And then when you look at from a racial side of it, you see younger people, more your African, also coming into the source of side hustle and SMMEs as well.
Talking about deeper challenges, so what are the primary challenges faced by individuals and households starting a side hustle in South Africa?
Look, starting a side hustle in South Africa, one of the challenges that you face is that obviously it's quite time consuming. Usually side hustles are known for being things that people then would do after their 9 to 5. So there's an element of now the time constraint that is there. One of the shortages is, or rather one of the challenges that we also see with side hustles is people then struggle with skills. So people want to actually pursue their side hustles but don't have the skills in terms of translating that into income. So those are some of the challenges that we see from a side hustle perspective. And also one of the other ones that we see from a challenging perspective on side hustles its own is that there's some challenges in terms of some employers and labor contracts that don't allow for additional income to also then come through. And then you also then find that there's also some issues around challenges in terms of just where to start from a side hustle perspective, in terms of monetizing the ideas or the passion that they have.
So in the report, there was a bit of a comparison looking at South Africa and Nigeria. And there was a high unemployment rate back then in 2022, which was 33% in Q3 in South Africa, and also in Nigeria. There was a lower unemployment rate in 2022, which was 5.3%. Well, we also know that Nigeria's economy is supported by 36.9 million SMMEs, which is around about 97% of all businesses. So what lessons can be learned from Nigeria's approach to supporting SMMEs and youth entrepreneurship?
Yeah, so look, some of the lessons that we need to learn, we know that there's high unemployment rates, even in South Africa as well. And some of the answers to that is SMMEs and side hustles. In fact, from a statistic perspective, SMMEs contribute 60% towards the GDP as well. So that's also quite important in terms of getting SMMEs and side hustles running. So one of the reasons, one of the stuff we can actually learn from Nigeria in terms of what we're doing is just also then the legislation aspect of what we do. So a lot of people struggle with SMMEs because of things like, for example, skills shortage. We struggle a lot with things like load shedding. That has also been quite a factor. We're struggling a lot as well in terms of just the environment that we're operating in. So the mindset also needs to be changed around what we're seeing in South Africa in terms of just what would be the SMME aspect of it. So legislation will have to just have a more conducive environment for businesses to thrive, and especially small businesses environment. We'll have to then also get the mindset. For example, we know that the gig economy in Africa, for example, contributes annually 2.9 billion in terms of the gig economy, which then shows the future potential of gig economy, so that the world needs to be geared around that. And also, I think what needs to also then happen is that the employment, or rather the infrastructure and the system as well, also needs to allow for that. For example, things like, for example, the gig workers, SMMEs, side hustles, what are some of the benefits that they can also get? Because some of the things that they have is that they've got flexibility of time, but some of the challenges is benefits, such as medical aid, such as pension funds, which also puts a bit of a challenge in terms of entering into those spaces.
So how can policymakers and stakeholders support the growth of side hustles in South Africa?
Yeah, so that's also then policies that also, like, for example, policies that support SMMEs and side hustles in terms of skills development, infrastructure, in terms of also some of the legislation that allows for the ease of navigation in terms of side hustles, right? And also just some mentoring, business mentoring around what it takes to run a business, how do you monetize it, what are some of the implications, especially when you start making additional income, what are the implications from a tax perspective? And then also just then, for example, what are the tips and ways to go in terms of registering a business, getting your side hustle moving from more of an informal sector to the formal aspect of it. So it's a mentoring aspect of it from a legislation perspective. It's also then allowing people to understand what are the process of business registration, taxes, and implications like that.
And before I let you go, how can technology and digital platforms be leveraged to support the growth and development of side hustles in low-income households?
Yeah, so side hustles are, I mean, the digital world is the future, right? And we're seeing that, for example, there's an annual increase of 11% in terms of the gig economy from a digital perspective in Africa. That also then shows that the future of digital is quite bright in Africa and in South Africa. So, for example, this then creates a world of borderless, a world for people. So the opportunities are quite a lot in terms of just how the gig economy can grow from a digital perspective and technology. When you look at things like fintech, how would fintech then grow? When you look at edutech, for example, how do you then take education and put it into a digital friendly environment as well? But I also do think that one of the things that we also then need to take into account when we look at technology is also then increasing our digital literacy a bit more in terms of how do we then tackle and stay abreast with also the world in terms of the digital trends and technology as well.
Okay, thank you for joining us on today's episode on Africa Side Hustle, and that's Itumeleng, Olien, Strategy and Insights Manager for Group Marketing at Momentum. So as we conclude today's episode, remember that Africa's entrepreneurial spirit is unstoppable. Turn your passions into profits and do join the movement. Share your hustle story with us on social media using hashtag Africa Side Hustle, and don't forget to subscribe for more entrepreneurial stories, business news, and insights on CNBCAfrica.com. Till next week.